Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely crucial if you're tracking development or the environment in India. We're going to demystify the Environmental Impact Assessment, or EIA, Notification 2006. Now, if you work in policy or advocacy, you already know this is the ultimate rulebook. But actually reading and decoding the legal jargon, well, that's a whole different beast. So let's break it down visually and make it make sense.
What's super interesting here is that we aren't just looking at some dusty relic from 2006. No, this is a totally living, breathing framework. The version we're looking at has been continuously updated with amendments right up to August 2023. It literally has to evolve, right? Because it needs to handle brand new types of projects, massive industrial expansions, and just the changing reality on the ground. So here's our game plan for today. We'll decode the EIA 2006, explain the project categories, walk through the 4 clearance stages, navigate the exemptions and amendments, and finally, look at why all of this really matters. All right, part 1, decoding the EIA 2006. What exactly is it, and who runs the show? The absolute core of this whole thing is something called Prior Environmental Clearance, or EC. You can think of this as the ultimate toll booth that any major project has to pass through. Basically, it's a mandatory approval needed before any actual construction or land prep begins. Sure, you can secure the land, buy it, fence it, but beyond that, you literally cannot stick a single shovel in the dirt until you get past this toll booth.
Now, you might be wondering, how on earth does a country as massive as India manage all this bureaucracy? Well, they delegate based on scale. It's like a giant sorting system. The central government, specifically the Ministry of Environment and Forests, they handle the absolute biggest projects. Then the states handle medium-sized ones through their own committees. And for really small, highly specific stuff like mining minor minerals on less than 5 hectares, that actually gets pushed all the way down to the district level.
Moving on to part 2, project categories explained. Let's look at category A versus category B. At the end of the day, categorization is all about the scale of potential environmental impact. On one hand, we have category A. These are your high-impact giants. Think of a massive thermal power plant generating 500 megawatts or more. Because of their sheer size, these go straight to the central government for appraisal. On the flip side, we have category B, which covers medium-impact projects, and these are handled by the state. Now notice this little split here. Category B is divided into B1 and B2. B1 projects require a full, heavy-duty environmental impact assessment report, while B2 projects, they don't need that massive report, so they get a somewhat simpler path. All right, part 3, the 4 clearance stages. This is the core journey a project takes to get cleared. So, any project that needs clearance has to survive a gauntlet of up to 4 sequential checkpoints. We've got screening, scoping, public consultation, and appraisal. Let's walk through exactly how these work, step by step. Stage 1 is screening. Now, the key takeaway here is that this step acts like a sorting hat, only for those state-level Category B projects we just talked about. The state committee looks at the application to figure out, does this need a full, massive EIA report, making it a B1? Or is it a B2 project that gets to skip the heavy paperwork? Oh, and Category A projects? They skip this screening step entirely because, well, they're so huge they automatically need a full EIA. Then we hit Stage 2, scoping. This is basically where the regulatory committee assigns the project its specific environmental homework. They figure out the comprehensive terms of reference, which is a fancy way of saying, here is exactly what you need to research and address in your impact report. But remember that sorting hat from Stage 1? Since Category B2 projects don't have to write an EIA report, they get to completely bypass the scoping step. Lucky them, right? Next up is Stage 3, and this is a big one, public consultation. This is usually the most visible public-facing phase of the whole ordeal. It's an absolutely vital checkpoint where local communities and people who might actually be affected by the project get to voice their concerns. Usually run by the State Pollution Control Board, this involves a real physical public hearing near the site, plus they gather written responses. It's all about making sure the locals are heard. But, and this is a major but, the rulebook has several built-in bypasses. You actually don't need a public consultation for everything. For instance, modernizing an irrigation project or building inside an already approved industrial estate. Exempt. Expanding a highway where you don't need to acquire new land. Exempt. Building constructions, national defense operations, and those fast-tracked B2 projects we mentioned, none of these have to hold local public hearings. Finally, we reach stage 4, appraisal. This is the ultimate moment of truth. The expert committee sits down, looks at all the documents, the final impact report, the public feedback, and they make their definitive recommendation. It boils down to a strict binary choice. They either say, yes, you're cleared, but with these specific conditions, or they reject the project outright. End of the line. Moving to part 4, navigating exemptions and amendments. Let's look at validity periods and some recent updates. Now, you don't just get a clearance ticket that lasts forever. There's a ticking clock. Most standard projects get a solid 10-year validity period to finish construction and start running. But, the framework is realistic. Some massive infrastructure just takes longer. So, River Valley projects, they get 13 years. Nuclear power gets 15. And mining operations can be granted an initial validity of up to 30 years, depending on the approved life of the mine. And it's fascinating to see how this legal framework adapts to massive crises. Tucked right into the amendments is a very specific COVID-19 exception. Basically, the period from April 1, 2020 to March 31, 2021 is totally wiped from the calculation of a project's validity timeline. They essentially hit the pause button on the expiration clock for that entire first year of the pandemic to make up for all the lockdowns. Pretty practical, honestly. We also see the rules constantly being tweaked to balance environmental regulation with industrial efficiency. For example, if an industrial plant wants to expand, and they can prove with hard data that there will be zero increase in their pollution load, they don't need to get a brand new clearance. Also, to support government biofuel initiatives, grain distilleries making ethanol for blended petrol are now fast-tracked as B2 projects. And if the government cancels and reallocates a coal block, the environmental clearance actually transfers automatically to the new winning bidder. And finally, part 5, why this matters. Let's talk about the balance between development and the environment. When you read a line like ascertaining concerns of local affected persons, it really hits home that this whole EIA process isn't just a mountain of bureaucratic paperwork. This is the actual, real-world legal mechanism that decides the big stuff. It dictates whether a massive highway bypasses a sensitive forest. It regulates how an industrial giant manages its toxic waste. And crucially, it determines whether a small, local village actually gets a legally protected voice when sweeping changes come to their backyard. Which leaves us with one massive question to chew on. Does this highly complex system, with its 4 stages, impact categories, and list of exemptions, actually strike the right balance? Does it allow for the rapid, super essential pace of India's development while still fiercely guarding the natural world we all rely on? It's a huge, incredibly difficult tightrope to walk, and this ever-evolving notification is the living blueprint trying to make it happen. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer. I'll catch you next time.